On Christmas Eve, my grandfather showed up for dinner and casually asked, "Did you enjoy the house I gave you a year ago?" I froze, my heart racing. "What house? I never got anything." My grandfather slowly glanced at my parents, their faces drained of color. And then, everything erupted into chaos. I was 24 years old, worked 2 jobs, and lived in an apartment where the ceiling leaked brown water when it rained. So when Grandfather Christopher mentioned the house he'd given me, I assumed he was confused. Maybe age was finally catching up to his sharp mind. But the silence that followed his question at our Christmas Eve dinner wasn't confusion. It was the sound of my parents' elaborate fraud collapsing. My father gripped his wine glass until his knuckles went white. My stepmother's fork clattered against her plate. And my stepbrother James actually looked up from his phone for the first time all evening. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that moment shattered everything, you need to know about the life I'd built from absolutely nothing, starting with that morning 3 days earlier when I discovered my landlord had turned off the heat again. December in Milwaukee cuts through you differently when you can't afford proper warmth. I woke at 5 a.m. to find ice crystals had formed on the inside of my apartment windows. The temperature in my studio couldn't have been more than 45 degrees. I wrapped myself in both blankets I owned, one from Goodwill, one my actual mother had made before she died giving birth to me, and shuffled to the hot plate to make instant coffee. The stove had been broken since August, but asking Mr. Peterson to fix it meant risking eviction. He'd made that clear to the last tenant who complained too much. My phone showed 3 missed calls from student loan services and a text from my manager at the bookstore. "Need you here by 5:45. Truck coming early." I dressed in layers. Tank top, long sleeve shirt, bookstore polo, and the oversized men's coat I'd found at Salvation Army. In the cracked mirror by the door, I looked like a child playing dress-up in someone else's life. The bus to Boundless Books cost $2.50 each way. I calculated, as I did every morning, whether walking the 3 miles would be worth saving the $5. But the December wind made that decision for me. I needed my fingers functional to stock shelves and work the register. Derek, the bookstore manager, was already there when I arrived, standing by the loading dock with a cigarette and a look of exhaustion that matched my own. "Truck's got double our usual order," he said. "Holiday shopping season. You good for overtime?" Overtime meant time and a half. $15 an hour instead of 10. I needed that money more than I needed feeling in my back, which hadn't stopped aching since I'd hauled that free mattress up 3 flights of stairs 2 years ago. "I'm good," I told him. We unloaded boxes for 3 straight hours. Architecture books I couldn't afford, their glossy pages showing buildings I dreamed of designing. Cookbooks featuring meals that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Self-help books about manifesting abundance and thinking your way to success, written by people who'd never chosen between food and electricity. During my break, I sat in the stockroom with my phone, trying to download architecture lecture videos on the bookstore's Wi-Fi. My data plan only gave me 2 gigabytes a month, and I'd used most of it applying for scholarships I wouldn't get and jobs that required degrees I didn't have. The video buffered endlessly. Buffer, freeze, timeout. The story of my life in 3 words. "Still studying?" Derek asked, finding me squinting at a grainy tutorial about load-bearing walls. "Community college doesn't teach the software," I explained. "YouTube University is free." He disappeared and came back with a damaged textbook. Fundamentals of Building Construction, retail price $78. The corner was water-stained, making it unsellable. "Inventory mistake," he said, setting it beside me. These small kindnesses kept me going, but they also reminded me how pathetic my situation was. Mary Walker. Charity case accepting damaged goods because undamaged ones were beyond reach. My shift at the daily grind started at 2 p.m. Just enough time to catch the bus across town, change in their bathroom and pretend I hadn't already worked 6 hours. The coffee shop catered to office workers and college students from Marquette University. Kids my age who complained about their parents' restrictions on their credit cards while I smiled and made their $8 lattes. Carol, the afternoon manager, pulled me aside during a slow period. "Corporate's cutting hours after New Year's," she said. "I might only be able to give you 10 hours a week." The mental math was instant and brutal. 10 hours at $9.50 meant $95 before taxes. My studio apartment cost $650 a month. Even with the bookstore job I'd be short. "I understand," I said, because what else could I say? Begging for hours was just another tax on poverty paid in dignity. On my break, I made the mistake of checking Instagram. James had posted from Cancun again. Living my best life thanks to the world's best parents. The photo showed him on a yacht, arms around two girls in bikinis, a bottle of champagne that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Harper had commented, "You deserve everything wonderful. So proud of my successful son." I scrolled back further, hating myself for the digital self-harm but unable to stop. There was James's BMW reveal from 6 months ago, Harper calling it an investment in his future. His graduation from that private university, the whole family there except me. I'd been working. Every photo was evidence of the life I'd never have, the family I'd never really been part of. The last customer of my shift was a woman in designer clothes who sent her latte back 3 times. Too hot, too cold, too much foam. Each remake was a small death of my patience, but I smiled through it. She didn't tip. Walking to the bus stop after closing, I passed a furniture store with a display bed in the window. An actual bed frame, not just a mattress on the floor. A comforter that matched the pillows. I stood there longer than I should have, missing my bus, imagining what it would feel like to sleep somewhere designed for comfort instead of mere survival. My phone buzzed. Harper calling. "Mary," her voice had that fake sweetness she used when other people were listening. "Just reminding you about Sunday dinner. Grandfather Christopher is making a special trip from Chicago. 6 o'clock sharp. And please," she paused, "try to wear something appropriate. The Hendersons might stop by." The Hendersons. Rich neighbors whose son was James's business partner in whatever scheme he was running this month. I'd be displayed like a prop. Evidence of their charitable inclusion of Mason's unfortunate first child. "I'll be there," I said, because I always was, always hoping this time might be different. Walking home in the dark, I thought about grandfather Christopher. I hadn't seen him in over a year. He'd always been kind but distant, busy with his development company in Chicago. The last time we'd talked, he'd asked about my studies and I'd lied, too ashamed to admit I'd dropped out of community college because I couldn't afford it even with financial aid. 3 days. 3 days until that dinner would reveal the truth about the life I should have had, the house that had been mine, the betrayal that had kept me in this frozen apartment while my stepbrother vacationed in paradise. But that night, warming soup on my hot plate while ice formed on my windows, I had no idea that everything was about to change. Sunday morning arrived gray and bitter, with the kind of wind that made my windows whistle. I dressed in my least worn outfit, black slacks from Target and a sweater without visible pills or stains, and caught the bus to my parents' house in Whitefish Bay. The ride took 40 minutes, each mile taking me further from Milwaukee's tired neighborhoods into the land of manicured hedges and 3-car garages. Their house sat on Birch Avenue like a monument to everything I'd never have. Red brick, white shutters, a wraparound porch with actual furniture meant for sitting, not just for show. Harper's garden gnomes stood guard along the walkway, each one probably costing more than my weekly groceries. Harper opened the door before I could knock. "Mary." Perfect timing. "Come in, come in." Her enthusiasm felt forced, like she was performing for an audience I couldn't see. She pulled me into the foyer, her hands immediately going to my hair. "Let me fix this," she said, producing a clip from nowhere and arranging my hair into something that apparently met her standards. "Much better. Here, take this." She draped one of her cardigans over my shoulders, cream-colored cashmere that probably cost $300. "Harper, I'm fine with." "Nonsense. We're taking photos today." She steered me toward the living room where Mason sat reading his tablet. James sprawled on the couch scrolling through his phone. "James, sit up properly." "Mason, put that away." The next 20 minutes became a bizarre photo shoot. Harper positioned us around the fireplace, adjusting our poses with the precision of a film director. She placed me front and center, her manicured hand on my shoulder, Mason's arm awkwardly around my other side. James had to be told 3 times to put his phone away. "Smile like you mean it," Harper commanded, holding her phone at various angles. "Mary, tilt your head left." "Oh, my left." "James, look like you actually want to be here." After the 15th photo, I finally asked, "What's all this for?" Harper's smile flickered for just a second. "Can't a mother want photos with her children?" Mother. Children. The word sat wrong in my mouth. She'd never called herself my mother before. For 21 years I'd been Mason's daughter from his first marriage, when she introduced me to anyone. During dinner, pot roast that I knew came from the expensive butcher downtown, Harper peppered me with questions about my life. Not the usual cursory "how's work?" before launching into stories about James's latest venture. Real questions, specific ones. Tell me about your architecture program. What software are you learning? I swallowed my surprise along with my green beans. AutoCAD mainly. Some Revit when I can find free tutorials. She typed something into her phone. And you're working toward your degree? Taking classes when I can afford them. I watched Mason shift in his chair, his jaw tightening. What year are you technically? Harper continued, still typing. I should be graduating this year, but with my schedule, probably another 2 years. He nodded, typing more. And you're still at that bookstore? The coffee shop? Both, yes. Same positions, same hours. The interrogation continued through dessert. What was my apartment like? Did I have roommates? What were my career goals? She documented every answer in her phone while Mason pushed food around his plate and James texted under the table. After dinner, Harper uploaded the photos to Facebook with captions that made me feel like I was reading about someone else's life. Blessed Sunday dinner with both my amazing children, and so proud of Mary and James, both following their dreams. The comments poured in from her friends. Beautiful family. You must be so proud. Mary looks just like you. That last one made me laugh out loud. I looked nothing like Harper with her bottle blonde hair and sharp features. I had my mother Catherine's dark hair, her round face, her brown eyes that Harper once said made me look perpetually confused. Over the next weeks, the invitations multiplied. Harper's book club, where she introduced me as our daughter Mary studying architecture. James's business presentation at some startup incubator, where I sat in the back row while Harper took photos of me, supporting my brother. The Hendersons' barbecue, where Harper kept her arm around me like we were best friends, telling everyone about my promising future in design. Each event felt like a performance where I didn't know my lines. Harper would brief me beforehand. If anyone asks, you're doing wonderfully. School is going great. You're happy. The word happy came with a look that suggested disagreement wasn't an option. The birthday surprise came in late November. I'd stopped expecting anything from them years ago. Maybe a text from Mason if he remembered, nothing from Harper or James. But that morning Harper called insisting I come for dinner. The silk scarf she presented was from Nordstrom. I knew because I'd seen her buy identical ones for her book club friends, always making sure to mention the designer label. Every young professional needs quality accessories, she said, wrapping it around my neck while Mason took photos. Mason slid a birthday card across the table. Inside was a crisp $100 bill. The last money he'd given me was $20 for my 18th birthday, and that had been accompanied by a lecture about financial responsibility. Thank you, I managed, genuinely shocked. James looked up from his phone long enough to say, we should get a picture. He actually stood next to me, put his arm around my shoulders and smiled for Harper's camera. Later I saw he'd posted it on Instagram, happy birthday to my sister. Sister. He'd never called me that before. I'd always been Mary or nothing at all. The weirdest part was how nervous Mason seemed through all of it. He kept checking his phone, glancing at Harper, starting sentences then stopping. When I tried to catch his eye to gauge what was happening, he looked away. We should do this more often, Harper said as I prepared to leave. Family time is so important. Walking to the bus stop, the silk scarf in my purse felt like a prop from a play I didn't understand. The $100 in my wallet might cover my electricity bill, but it couldn't buy answers to why they suddenly cared about documenting my existence. The next Sunday when I asked about grandfather Christopher, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Oh, he's traveling, Harper said too quickly. Europe. Business expansion. For a whole year? I pressed. Mason cleared his throat. The development industry requires a lot of networking. He's been asking about you though, Harper added, pulling out her phone. Look, he emailed asking how you're doing. She showed me a message that seemed oddly formal for grandfather. Please tell Mary I'm thinking of her and glad she's doing well with her studies. Why doesn't he just call me? I asked. Harper's laugh was brittle. You know how he is about international phone charges. Grandfather Christopher owned a development company worth millions. He wouldn't care about phone charges. But Harper was already changing the subject, asking James about his latest project, and Mason was refilling wine glasses with shaking hands. Something was happening. The photos, the questions, the sudden inclusion, the gifts. It all added up to something I couldn't quite see. They were building a narrative, crafting a story where I was a beloved daughter, but I couldn't understand who the audience was supposed to be. 3 weeks passed after that uncomfortable conversation about grandfather, and December arrived with a vengeance. Milwaukee transformed into a frozen postcard. All twinkling lights and pristine snow that looked beautiful from inside but felt brutal when you were waiting for the bus at 5 in the morning. Christmas Eve fell on a Thursday, and Harper had called me at work 3 times to confirm I would be there by 6 sharp. I stood in Harper's kitchen at 6:45, wrestling with the turkey that refused to brown evenly while she fussed over place settings in the dining room. The house smelled like cinnamon and rosemary, the kind of deliberate holiday scent that came from expensive candles rather than actual baking. Through the kitchen doorway, I watched her arrange and rearrange the silverware, muttering about proper presentation. That's when I heard the voice that made me freeze, oven mitts still on my hands. "Merry Christmas, everyone." Grandfather Christopher's baritone filled the foyer, warm and commanding as always. I hadn't seen him in over a year, hadn't even known he was back from Europe. I rushed out of the kitchen, nearly colliding with Harper, who had gone rigid in the dining room doorway. Grandfather stood in the entryway, snow still dusting the shoulders of his charcoal wool coat. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the wind outside, and his blue eyes, the same shade as my mother's had been according to the few photos I'd seen, crinkled at the corners when he saw me. "Mary, my dear girl," he said, opening his arms. I practically ran to him, not caring that my hands were still greasy from the turkey. He smelled like expensive cologne and winter air, solid and real in a way that made me realize how much I'd missed him. His embrace was firm, genuine, nothing like the awkward half-hugs Mason occasionally offered. "I didn't know you were coming," I said into his shoulder. "Wanted to surprise everyone. Flew in from London this morning." He pulled back to look at me, his hands on my shoulders. "You look tired, sweetheart. Are you taking care of yourself?" Before I could answer, Harper appeared, her smile so forced it looked painful. "Christopher. What a wonderful surprise. We weren't expecting." "Clearly," Grandfather said, his tone pleasant but his eyes sharp as they took in Harper's panicked expression. "Mason, aren't you going to greet your father?" Mason emerged from his study, his face already flushed from wine. "Dad. Good to see you." They shook hands formally, no warmth between them. James slouched in from the living room, barely looking up from his phone to mumble a greeting. Grandfather's expression tightened slightly at the disrespect, but he said nothing. "Well," Harper chirped, her voice too high, "dinner's almost ready. Mary was just helping with the turkey." "Since when does Mary have to help with cooking?" Grandfather asked. "Isn't she a guest?" An uncomfortable silence settled over the foyer. Harper's laugh came out strangled. "She's family, Christopher. Family helps." The word family seemed to hang in the air, meaning different things to everyone in the room. Dinner began normally enough. We sat at the dining table with its good china and crystal glasses that only came out for special occasions. Grandfather sat at the head where Mason usually presided, a subtle shift in power that everyone noticed but no one acknowledged. I ended up between Grandfather and James, who was already on his second glass of wine despite being barely through the salad course. Harper kept up a stream of nervous chatter about renovations they were planning, the Hendersons' new boat, anything to fill the silence. Mason contributed occasional grunts of agreement while sawing at his turkey with unnecessary force. We were halfway through the main course when Grandfather set down his fork and looked directly at me. His expression was warm, casual, completely unaware of the bomb he was about to detonate. "Mary dear, did you enjoy the house I gave you a year ago? I know Shorewood can be a bit quiet, but I thought the location would be perfect for you, close to downtown but still residential. Have you settled in well?" The words didn't make sense at first. They floated across the table like foreign language, syllables I recognized but couldn't assemble into meaning. I became hyper-aware of everything. The grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the way the candlelight reflected off the crystal, Harper's fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "I'm sorry, what house?" My voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking. Harper's fork clattered onto her plate, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Mason's wine glass trembled so violently that red liquid sloshed onto the white tablecloth. James actually looked up from his phone, his face draining of color as his eyes darted between our parents. Grandfather's expression shifted from casual warmth to confusion, then to something darker. The house in Shorewood. The 3-bedroom colonial on Maple Street. I transferred the deed to your name last year for your 23rd birthday. I've never. The words wouldn't come. My brain felt like it was moving through thick syrup trying to process what he was saying. Mason. Grandfather's voice had gone deadly quiet, the kind of calm that preceded storms. Explain to me why Mary doesn't know about her house. Mason opened his mouth but no sound emerged. His face had turned a mottled purple red like he was choking on air. Harper jumped in, her words tumbling over each other. Christopher, there must be some misunderstanding. Mary prefers her independence. She wanted to stay in her apartment, we thought. You thought? Grandfather's voice could have frozen water. You thought what, exactly? That you could make decisions about a property I gifted directly to my granddaughter. It's not like that, Mason finally managed to croak. The situation was. The house was sold 8 months ago, James blurted out, then immediately looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body, floating somewhere near the ceiling, observing the destruction of my family's careful facade. Sold. Grandfather repeated the word like he was tasting poison. You sold Mary's house. We had debts, Harper whispered, tears starting to streak her makeup. James's business needed capital, and we thought Mary was doing fine. You thought she was doing fine working 2 jobs and living in poverty while you stole her inheritance? The word stole landed like a slap. Harper actually flinched. Mason reached for his wine glass with shaking hands. The paperwork, Grandfather continued, his voice growing louder. The deed was in Mary's name. How did you? His face went white as realization dawned. You forged her signature. We were going to tell her, Mason said weakly. Eventually. When things were better. When things were better? Grandfather stood so abruptly his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. You committed fraud. You stole from your own daughter. And those photos. He pulled out his phone, scrolling furiously. These family photos you've been sending me, telling me how well Mary was doing, how happy she was in her new house. It was all lies. The photos. Suddenly everything clicked into place with nauseating clarity. The sudden interest in including me, the documentation of fake family moments, Harper's insistence on posting about both her children. They'd been creating evidence, a digital alibi to cover their crime. I need some air, I said, standing on legs that felt like water. I made it to the bathroom before my knees gave out. I sat on the closed toilet lid, my whole body shaking. Through the door, I could hear the explosion continuing. Grandfather's rage, Harper's sobbing, Mason's pathetic attempts at justification. $450,000. They'd stolen a house worth nearly $500,000 and told me there was no money for my education. My hands gripped the edge of the bathroom sink, knuckles white, while the chaos continued beyond the door. I could hear Grandfather's voice, controlled but lethal, cutting through Harper's hysteria. The bathroom tiles felt cold through my dress as I slid down to sit on the floor, trying to process what had just happened. A house. My house. Gone. A sharp knock rattled the door. Mary, sweetheart, come back out here, Grandfather's voice, gentler now but still commanding. We need to sort this out properly. I stood on unsteady legs and opened the door. The dining room had transformed into a war zone. Harper sat with her face in her hands, shoulders heaving. Mason stared at the wine-stained tablecloth like it held the secrets of the universe. James had actually put his phone down, his face the color of old paper. Grandfather stood by the window with his phone pressed to his ear. Patricia? Yes, I need you on speaker. We have a situation. He set the phone on the table and a woman's crisp voice filled the room. Good evening, Mr. Walker. How can I assist you? My son and daughter-in-law have sold property that was legally transferred to my granddaughter without her knowledge. They forged her signature on the sale documents. The pause that followed felt eternal. That constitutes federal wire fraud if any documents cross state lines. Also identity theft, forgery, and potentially grand larceny depending on the amount. $450,000, grandfather said flatly. That's definitely grand larceny. We're looking at potential prison sentences of 5 to 15 years per count. I can have our forensic accounting team begin an investigation immediately. Harper made a sound like a wounded animal. Mason finally spoke, his voice cracking. Dad, please, we can work this out privately. Privately? Grandfather turned on him. You stole from your own daughter. You committed federal crimes. Patricia, begin the investigation. I want every transaction tracked. Wait, James suddenly burst out. This isn't fair. That money went to good use. My businesses needed capital. I have potential. Grandfather laughed, but there was no humor in it. Potential? You're 26 years old, James. You've burned through 3 failed startups. A food delivery app that never delivered food. A social media platform with no users. What was the latest one? Luxury camping equipment for people who don't camp. The market wasn't ready. The market wasn't the problem. You have no work ethic, no business sense, and no accountability. Meanwhile, Mary has been working since she was 18, putting herself through school while living in poverty. Can we continue this privately? Patricia's voice cut through. Mr. Walker, I'll send my team over in the morning to collect the necessary documents. After grandfather ended the call, he pulled out his tablet and began scrolling. Let me show you something, Mary. He turned the screen toward me. These are the emails your parents sent me over the past year. The first image made my stomach turn. It was me, clearly photoshopped, standing in a kitchen I'd never seen. The marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, the breakfast nook with a garden view. All completely foreign. Harper had written underneath, Mary loves her new kitchen. She's already hosted 2 dinner parties. There's more, grandfather scrolled. Another fabricated photo showed me in what must have been the living room, decorated for Christmas last year. Mary's first Christmas in her new home. She's so grateful for your generosity, Dad. Each image felt like discovering another layer of betrayal. They'd created an entire fictional life for me. There was even a thank you card, supposedly from me, written in Harper's careful script. Dear grandfather, the house is perfect. Thank you for giving me this incredible start to my adult life. I think I'm going to be sick, I said and meant it. I made it to the kitchen sink just in time. Behind me, I heard Harper's voice, high and desperate. It's Mason's fault. His gambling debts. We were going to lose everything. Gambling. I turned, wiping my mouth. Dad gambles. Mason's face crumbled. It started small. Office pools, fantasy football. Then sports betting apps made it so easy. I kept thinking I could win it back. How much? Grandfather's voice was ice. 80,000. Maybe more. The number hung in the air. $80,000 in gambling debts while I'd been eating ramen noodles for months because real food was too expensive. That's not even the worst part, Mason continued, his words slurring slightly from wine and shame. I've been taking money you sent for Mary since she was 10. School supplies, clothes, medical care. Thousands of dollars a year. You told me we couldn't afford new school shoes, I whispered. I wore the same pair with holes in them for 2 years. James needed tutoring. James needed tutoring because he didn't bother studying. I was shouting now, years of suppressed anger erupting. I studied with library books and free websites while James got private tutors he ignored. Mason's next words destroyed something inside me that I didn't know could still break. Catherine dying. It broke something in me. Every time I looked at you I saw her. And I blamed you. You were the reason she was gone. James was my chance to start over, to have a real family. The silence that followed was deafening. Grandfather moved toward Mason with such fury that James actually jumped up to intervene. Don't, grandfather said quietly. Don't you dare stop me from saying this. Catherine was my daughter. She died from a medical complication that had nothing to do with Mary. You've spent 24 years punishing an innocent child for your own inability to grieve. I know, Mason sobbed. I know I was wrong. Wrong? You were criminally abusive. Mary, pack your things. You're coming with me tonight. I don't have anything to pack, I said numbly. Just my purse and coat. Then get those. We're leaving. I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic room I'd occupied as a child when I stayed over, before I'd moved out at 18. It looked exactly the same. Single bed with a thin mattress, Small dresser with a broken drawer, one window overlooking the garage. I opened the closet and found a cardboard box of my old things Harper must have shoved up here. Report cards with teacher comments. Mary shows exceptional promise, and Mary would excel with proper resources. College brochures for Northwestern University of Wisconsin, schools I'd dreamed of attending. Notebooks filled with building designs I'd drawn, architectural dreams sketched in pencil by a girl who thought hard work would be enough. Harper appeared in the doorway, her makeup completely destroyed, looking older than I'd ever seen her. Mary, please understand. James is my son. My only child. I had to choose him. I was a child too, I said, stuffing the notebooks into a plastic grocery bag I found under the bed. I was 3 years old when you married my father. You could have chosen to love me too. It wasn't that simple. Yes, it was. I pushed past her, grocery bag in hand. It was exactly that simple. Downstairs, grandfather waited by the door, already in his coat. Mason sat at the table, head in his hands. James stood by the window, still trying to process that his consequence-free life had just ended. This isn't over, grandfather said to the room. My lawyers will be in touch. Grandfather's Tesla pulled through wrought iron gates onto a private drive lined with 100-year-old oak trees. Even in the darkness, with snow falling softly against the windows, I could sense the magnitude of where we were heading. The headlights swept across manicured hedges and stone walls before illuminating a Tudor-style mansion that seemed to rise from the earth like something from a fairy tale. Welcome to your new home, grandfather said quietly, placing his hand over mine. The word home stuck in my throat. I'd never had one of those, not really. Just temporary spaces where I was tolerated, endured, or lately simply survived. A woman in her 50s opened the massive oak door before we reached it. Mr. Walker, I've prepared the blue room as you requested. Thank you, Margaret. This is my granddaughter, Mary. She'll be staying indefinitely. Margaret's face softened as she looked at me, clutching my grocery bag of possessions. Welcome, Miss Mary. I'll have some soup brought up and perhaps some tea. The foyer alone was larger than my entire apartment. Marble floors reflected the light from a crystal chandelier, and a curved staircase swept upward like something from a classic movie. Original paintings lined the walls, actual art, not prints from discount stores. I followed grandfather up the stairs, my footsteps silent on thick carpet that probably cost more than my annual rent. The blue room took my breath away. Soft navy walls, white crown molding, a 4-poster bed with layers of pillows and a down comforter. The windows overlooked Lake Michigan, dark water stretching endlessly under the winter moon. An ensuite bathroom featured a clawfoot tub and marble countertops. A walk-in closet stood empty, waiting for clothes I didn't own. This can't be real, I whispered. It's very real, grandfather said gently. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start fixing what they broke. But I couldn't sleep. I sat on the window seat watching snow fall over the lake, afraid that if I closed my eyes, I'd wake up back in my studio with its brown water stains and rattling pipes. When dawn painted the water gold and pink, when Margaret knocked softly with a breakfast tray of fresh fruit and pastries I'd only seen in bakery windows, the tears finally came. Not tears of sadness but of recognition. I had always been worth saving. Someone had finally seen it. The forensic accountant arrived at 9 sharp. Linda Zhao was a small woman with fierce eyes who laid out spreadsheets across grandfather's study desk with the precision of a general planning a campaign. I've pulled 20 years of financial records, she began, adjusting her glasses. The theft is systematic and extensive. The numbers made my head spin. Monthly payments of $3,000 grandfather had sent for my care since I was 4. Lump sums for birthdays, Christmases, educational milestones. A college fund that should have contained $200,000 by my 18th birthday. They created an entire false paper trail, Linda continued, showing receipts on her tablet. Private tutoring that never happened. Medical specialists you never saw. They even claimed orthodontic work. She looked at my slightly crooked teeth with sympathy. I'm assuming you never had braces. I couldn't even afford regular dental cleanings, I said quietly. There's more. Linda pulled up another document. They claimed you attended a private prep school. The tuition they invoiced your grandfather for would have covered Exeter or Choate. While I had worn shoes with holes and studied from damaged textbooks at public school, My parents had been collecting $40,000 a year for my non-existent private education. The house is just the latest theft, Linda said. The total diverted funds approach $800,000 over 2 decades. 800,000. The number was too large to comprehend. It was an entire life stolen opportunity by opportunity, dollar by dollar. The next morning, grandfather's legal team assembled in the dining room. Patricia Williams, whom I'd heard on speakerphone, turned out to be a formidable black woman in her 40s who commanded the room with quiet authority. Her associates, David Chin and Jennifer Martinez, had already compiled enough evidence to build multiple cases. We have 3 paths, Patricia explained, her hands folded on the mahogany table. Criminal prosecution would likely result in prison sentences for both your father and stepmother. Federal fraud charges, identity theft, forgery. We're looking at serious time. The thought of Mason in prison made me feel nothing. That worried me more than anger would have. Option 2 is civil litigation. We sue for damages, likely recovering most of the stolen funds through property liens and wage garnishment. And the third? Grandfather asked. Mediated settlement. They agree to our terms, sign over certain assets and avoid criminal prosecution. Jennifer added, We've found evidence of your father owing significant gambling debts to questionable people. He's desperate. That gives us leverage. David pushed a folder toward me. There's something else. Your stepbrother James has been involved since he turned 18. He knew about the house, helped forge some documents. He's equally liable. I thought of James and his designer clothes, spending money that should have been mine while I worked double shifts. Good, I said, surprising myself with the hardness in my voice. Patricia reached across the table and took my hand. I need you to understand something. What they did to you wasn't just theft. It was systematic child abuse through financial deprivation. You were denied medical care, education, basic necessities while they lived luxuriously on funds meant for you. This was never about family dysfunction. This was criminal abuse. The words hit me like a revelation. I'd spent years believing I wasn't worth investing in, that my struggles were normal, deserved. But Patricia, who mentioned growing up poor herself, who understood the difference between poverty and theft, was offering me a different narrative. 3 days later, Grandfather drove me to his company headquarters in downtown Chicago. The building rose 40 floors into the winter sky, all glass and steel ambition. The receptionist greeted him with deference and everyone we passed nodded respectfully. I want you to meet someone, he said, leading me to a corner office. Michael Chin, my head of residential development. Michael, this is my granddaughter Mary. Michael was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s with kind eyes and an easy smile. Your grandfather has shown me your portfolio from community college. Your work is impressive, especially considering you were self-taught on most of the software. I had to use YouTube tutorials and library computers, I admitted. That makes it more impressive, not less. Someone who can learn complex CAD programs from free resources has the drive we need. He spread architectural plans across his desk. We're developing affordable housing in Bronzeville. Homes for working families who deserve dignity and beauty, not just basic shelter. My throat tightened. People who work multiple jobs and still struggle. Exactly. Your grandfather thinks your perspective would be invaluable to this project. Grandfather spoke then. The position of junior architect comes with a starting salary of $78,000, full benefits and educational support to complete your degree. $78,000. More than I'd made in 3 years of double shifts. I don't have my degree yet, I said weakly. You have talent and drive, Michael said. The degree is just paperwork we'll help you complete. Can you start Monday? Monday morning arrived crisp and bright. I dressed in the navy blazer and tailored pants grandfather had taken me to buy over the weekend. Clothes that actually fit, that made me look like someone with a real career. As I adjusted my new watch in the mirror, my phone buzzed with a call from a blocked number. Mary. Mason's voice sounded hollow, desperate. Please don't hang up. I paused at the bedroom door, Margaret waiting downstairs to drive me to my first day at the development company. What do you want? The lawyers, your grandfather's lawyers, they're forcing us to sell the house. They filed liens against everything. Harper can't stop crying. She won't eat. Please, Mary, can't you talk to him? Make this stop. Through the phone, I heard Harper wailing in the background, the kind of theatrical sobbing she used to do when the country club rejected her first membership application. James's voice cut through, shouting about his destroyed credit score, how his life was ruined. "Your life is ruined?" I said quietly. "I've been living with a ruined life for 24 years. That's not, we never meant." I ended the call. Margaret was waiting with coffee and an encouraging smile. As we drove through Chicago's morning traffic toward my new future, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a kind of release. Justice had its own timeline and mine had finally arrived. The first week at my job was overwhelming in the best way. I had my own desk, a computer that actually worked, software I'd only dreamed of using. Michael assigned me to shadow different team members, learning how real architects translated vision into reality. My colleagues treated me with respect, asking my opinions, including me in lunch conversations about design philosophy and urban planning. That Friday, a former high school classmate, Jenny, messaged me on Facebook. "Did you see what happened to James?" She attached a photo that made me set down my coffee. James stood at a job fair in the Milwaukee Convention Center, wearing a suit that was clearly Mason's, too broad in the shoulders, too long in the legs. He was in line at a booth for a chain restaurant, surrounded by 18-year-olds with more enthusiasm than he'd ever possessed. His face showed the shock of someone who'd never faced consequences suddenly drowning in them. Jenny's next message explained everything. His BMW got repossessed right in front of Brittany at Whole Foods. She dumped him on the spot. Then his business partners found out about the fraud thing and pulled all their funding. He's been applying everywhere, but turns out a business degree means nothing when you've never actually worked a day in your life. I studied the photo. The golden boy who'd gotten everything handed to him was now begging for the kind of job I'd done at 18. The same job he'd mocked me for having. More messages came throughout the week from people who thought I'd want to know about my family's downfall. Harper's carefully constructed social life had crumbled like tissue paper in rain. The Shorewood Country Club, where she'd spent years cultivating her image, revoked her membership when news of the fraud spread. The letter they sent was formal but devastating. Conduct unbecoming of a member, association with criminal activity, immediate termination of privileges. Mrs. Henderson, their neighbor, called grandfather's house one evening while I was reviewing blueprints in the study. Margaret transferred the call to me, though I couldn't imagine why she'd reach out. "Mary, dear," Mrs. Henderson began, her voice dripping with the fake concern of someone who loved drama. "I thought you should know about your stepmother. She's not handling things well." "I don't really." "She was at the Dollar Tree yesterday." "The Dollar Tree?" "Buying generic shampoo and crying in aisle 3. The same woman who used to brag about her monthly spa treatments and wouldn't shop anywhere but Whole Foods." I made non-committal sounds while Mrs. Henderson continued her gossip. Harper had been asked to resign from 3 charity boards. Her book club, 15 Years of Tuesday Meetings, had quietly excluded her from the new reading list. The other mothers from James's private school had formed a new lunch group without her. "She tried to organize a neighborhood holiday party," Mrs. Henderson continued, "but no one responded to her invitation. It's like she's become invisible." After I hung up, I sat in grandfather's study looking out at Lake Michigan. Harper was learning what I'd known my whole life. What it felt like to be unwanted, excluded, deemed unworthy of basic social inclusion. The woman who'd told me I should be grateful for scraps was now living on them. But Mason's collapse was the most complete. Patricia called with updates as the legal team tracked down the extent of his deception and debt. His employer, a conservative insurance firm that valued reputation above all else, fired him the day the fraud investigation became public. No severance, no reference, just a security escort from the building with his belongings in a cardboard box. "We've discovered something else," Patricia said during one call. "Your father owes approximately $120,000 in gambling debts. Some to legitimate casinos, but about $30,000 to less official creditors." "Less official?" "The kind who charge interest in ways that aren't strictly legal. It explains his desperation to steal from you. He was trying to stay ahead of some dangerous people. Without his job, without access to my stolen funds, Mason had no way to pay. Neighbors reported seeing him coming home at strange hours, looking over his shoulder, parking his car different places each night. The gambling addiction he'd hidden for years was now consuming him publicly. He'd been spotted at the casino at Potawatomi at 3 in the morning, drunk and trying to win back money he didn't have. Someone, I suspected Mrs. Henderson, sent me a photo of Mason at a liquor store buying the cheapest whiskey they sold. His hair had gone completely gray in 6 weeks. His clothes hung loose on a frame that had lost probably 30 pounds. He looked like he'd aged a decade since Christmas Eve. When he tried calling grandfather directly from the house phone, I happened to be in the room. Grandfather put it on speaker. "Dad, please." Mason's voice was slurred, broken. "I'm your son. Doesn't that mean anything?" "Mary was your daughter," grandfather replied coldly. "Did that mean anything to you?" "That's different." "You're right. It is different. She was a child who depended on you. You were an adult who chose to steal from her. You're experiencing exactly what you put her through, complete abandonment by family. Except you're a grown man who created his own situation. She was an innocent child." The line went dead. Grandfather looked at me across his desk. "He won't be calling again. I've made sure of that." By the end of my first month at the development company, my family's fall from grace was complete. They'd lost their house, their reputation, their social standing, and each other. Harper and Mason's marriage was crumbling under the weight of mutual blame. James had moved back in with them, into whatever small apartment they'd managed to rent, 3 failures sharing close quarters and resentment. Meanwhile, I was designing homes for families who deserved better than what they'd been given. The Bronzeville affordable housing project consumed my days in the best possible way. 6 months had passed since Christmas Eve, 6 months of learning what it meant to have a real career, real purpose, real worth. I was reviewing window placement specifications to maximize natural light when Michael knocked on my office door. My own office with my name on the door, something I still couldn't quite believe. "Your receptionist just called. There's someone in the lobby insisting on seeing you. A Harper Walker." My hand stilled on the drafting tablet. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 20th floor, Chicago stretched out under the June sun, peaceful and distant from the chaos Harper represented. "Tell security I'll be down in 10 minutes. I found her in the parking garage instead, having somehow talked her way past the lobby security. She stood next to my Honda Civic, a reliable used car grandfather had helped me purchase, looking like a ghost of her former self. Her hair, once perfectly highlighted blonde, showed 2 inches of gray roots. The designer handbag had been replaced with a canvas tote from Walgreens. She wore a blouse I recognized from Target's clearance rack because I'd considered buying it myself years ago when $7 seemed like too much for a shirt. "Mary, please. Just 5 minutes." I stopped 10 feet away, keys in my hand. The parking garage's fluorescent lights made her look even more haggard, highlighting the deep lines around her eyes and mouth that expensive creams could no longer hide. "James tried to hurt himself last week," she said, the words tumbling out desperately. "Pills. We found him in time, but he's not handling this well. He can't keep a job. He's been fired from 3 restaurants for not showing up. He sits in his room all day. We're all in the same room now in a studio apartment. Mason's drinking is killing him. His liver is failing. The doctor says if he doesn't stop," her voice cracked, "we're being evicted next week. The landlord won't give us another extension." She took a step forward and I instinctively stepped back. Then she did something I never imagined Harper Walker would do. She dropped to her knees on the oil-stained concrete of the parking garage, her hands clasped like she was praying. "I know what we did was wrong. I know we failed you. But please, Mary, we're desperate. Just enough to prevent the eviction. Just enough to get James help. Please." I looked down at this woman who had spent 24 years making me feel like nothing, now literally on her knees before me. The woman who told me I should be grateful for scraps, who said some people were meant for better things and I wasn't one of them, who chose her biological son over me every single day of my childhood. "You should try being more resourceful," I said, my voice steady and cold. "That's what you always told me. Some people are meant for success and some people are meant for struggle. I guess now you know which one you are." I walked past her to my car. As I drove up the garage ramp, I saw her in my rearview mirror, still on her knees, sobbing into her hands. I felt something, not satisfaction exactly, but not guilt either. Just the hollow echo of justice served cold. 3 days later, grandfather and I were at Whole Foods selecting ingredients for dinner. He'd been teaching me to cook properly, real meals with fresh ingredients, not the rice and beans I'd survived on for years. We were debating between 2 types of olive oil when I saw him, James at the end of the aisle restocking shopping carts. He wore the store's polyester uniform, the name tag crooked on his chest. His face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp where there used to be softness from good living. His hands shook slightly as he nested the carts together, the metallic crash echoing through the produce section. Our eyes met across 20 feet of organic vegetables. For a moment time seemed to pause. I saw recognition flash across his face, then shame, then something that might have been desperation. He took a half step toward us, his mouth opening as if to speak. Then he saw grandfather beside me, tall and imposing even at 75, and stopped. His shoulders slumped. He turned back to the shopping carts, gripping the handle of one so tightly his knuckles went white. I watched him push the line of carts toward the entrance, his head down, moving with the defeated shuffle of someone who'd given up hoping for rescue. "Did you want to speak with him?" Grandfather asked quietly. I picked up a container of cherry tomatoes, examining them with more attention than they deserved. No. There's nothing to say. But watching James work the job he'd once mocked me for having stirred something unexpected. Not quite pity, but an understanding of how far someone could fall when the safety net they'd taken for granted disappeared. The golden child who'd gotten everything was now living my old life, except he'd never developed the strength to endure it. The letter from Mason arrived the following Monday, forwarded from grandfather's house to my office. The envelope was thin, cheap, the kind you buy in bulk at dollar stores. His handwriting on the address was shaky, uncertain, like an old man's even though he was only 52. I opened it during lunch, alone in my office with the door closed. "Mary," it began, the letters uneven. "I'm writing this sober, though that's becoming rarer these days. I wanted you to know that I understand now. Not just what we did, the theft, the lies, but what we took from you beyond money. We took your childhood. Your sense of worth. Your belief that you deserve to be loved. I've been seeing a therapist at the free clinic. She's helping me understand that I never grieved Catherine properly. I blamed you for surviving when she didn't, as if a baby could choose such things. The truth is I was a coward. Loving you would have meant facing the pain of losing her every day. James and Harper were easier. A fresh start. A family that didn't remind me of what I'd lost. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that every morning when I wake up in our studio apartment, when I see Harper's tears and James's hollow eyes, when I feel my body failing from the drinking I can't seem to stop, I think about you in that attic room. You in that moldy apartment. You working 2 jobs while we spent your money. The therapist calls it karma. I call it justice. You survived what we did to you and became something remarkable. We're being destroyed by getting exactly what we thought we deserved. Everything that was meant for you. The irony isn't lost on me. I hope you're happy. I mean that. I hope you're finally getting the life Catherine would have wanted for you." It was signed simply Mason, not Dad or your father. Just Mason. A man acknowledging he'd never earned the right to those titles. I read it twice, then filed it in my desk drawer. I felt no surge of emotion, no satisfaction, no forgiveness. Just a hollow recognition that he finally understood what he'd done, far too late for it to matter. That evening, grandfather found me on the terrace overlooking Lake Michigan, watching the sun set over the water. He sat beside me in comfortable silence for a while before speaking. I could help them, you know. Not completely, but enough to keep them from complete destruction. A small apartment, basic necessities. It wouldn't affect our lives at all. I'd been thinking about this possibility since seeing James at the grocery store. Part of me, the part that remembered being 3 years old and hoping for a mother's love from Harper, wanted to say yes. To be better than they were. To prove I hadn't let their cruelty make me cruel. But the larger part, the part that had survived on nothing while they lived on my stolen inheritance, knew better. "If you help them now, they learn nothing," I said. "They'll see it as vindication that family eventually comes through, that consequences can be avoided if you just wait long enough. They need to experience the full weight of what they did. Not out of cruelty, but because it's the only way they'll ever truly understand what they put me through." Grandfather nodded slowly. "You're stronger than I would be." "No," I said, watching the last of the sun disappear behind the horizon. "I'm exactly as strong as they forced me to become." The darkness settled over Lake Michigan like a blanket, and grandfather and I remained on the terrace in comfortable silence. The decision not to help them felt final, like closing a book I'd never open again. That night, I dreamed of my mother Catherine for the first time, not from photographs but as a warm presence, nodding with approval at the choice I'd made. 18 months passed. The Bronzeville project consumed my days and filled my nights with purpose instead of survival anxiety. Every design choice mattered. Where to place windows to maximize light in small spaces, how to create storage solutions that didn't cost extra, choosing materials that were both affordable and dignified. I understood these families because I had been them. The Chicago Architecture Foundation announced their annual awards in early November. Michael had submitted our Bronzeville development without telling me. When the letter arrived at the office declaring we'd won the Regional Innovation Award for Affordable Housing Design, I sat at my desk crying while my colleagues applauded. Michael insisted I give the acceptance speech since the winning elements were primarily my contributions. The ceremony took place at the Chicago Cultural Center, its Tiffany dome glowing above hundreds of architects, developers, and city officials. I wore a black dress I'd bought with my own money, not expensive but mine, chosen because I liked it, not because it was all I could afford. Standing at the podium, I looked out at the audience and saw Mr. Peterson, my former landlord, sitting in the third row. Grandfather had somehow found and invited him. This award belongs to every family living paycheck to paycheck who deserves beauty in their homes, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I designed these spaces understanding that dignity doesn't require luxury. That small spaces can still inspire dreams. That a child doing homework at a kitchen table deserves good light just as much as one with a private study. When you've lived in spaces that remind you of your poverty every day, you understand how much environment shapes hope. The applause felt different from validation. It felt like purpose. Mr. Peterson actually had tears in his eyes, perhaps finally understanding why I'd never complained about the broken stove or leaking ceiling. After the ceremony, Michael pulled me aside. "You're leading our next project. Full creative control. It's a women's shelter renovation and I can't think of anyone better suited for it." 2 weeks before Christmas, exactly 2 years after that explosive Christmas Eve dinner, Grandfather asked me to accompany him somewhere. He drove us to Shorewood, to a construction site on Maple Street. My chest tightened when I realized where we were. The lot where the house meant for me had once stood. "I bought it back," Grandfather said quietly. "The people who purchased it from your parents were happy to sell for a profit." Construction workers moved across the lot, laying foundation for something new. The architectural plans posted on the temporary fence showed a 3-story building with clean lines and welcoming spaces. "It's going to be a community center," Grandfather explained, "for young women aging out of foster care. They'll have temporary housing on the top floor, job training facilities on the second, and community spaces on the ground level. Everything they need to build their lives when they have no family support." He pulled out a smaller sign that would be mounted by the entrance. "The Catherine Walker Center for Women's Independence." My mother's name. My throat closed completely. "Your story inspired this, Mary. How many other forgotten daughters are out there working 2 jobs, living in terrible conditions, believing they're not worth investing in? This center will tell them differently." We stood watching concrete pour into foundation forms and I felt something shift in my chest. My mother, who I'd never met, would have a legacy beyond her death. Her name would mean hope instead of loss. The 3rd anniversary of that Christmas Eve fell on a Thursday. I took the day off, driving to Milwaukee for the first time in months. Not to see anyone, just to visit my mother's grave at Forest Hill Cemetery. The morning was crisp, frost covering the grass, my breath visible in the cold air. I was arranging fresh roses on her headstone when footsteps crunched on the frozen path behind me. I turned to find Mason standing 20 feet away, holding his own bouquet of carnations. Cheap grocery store flowers but fresh. He looked nothing like the father I'd known. Sober, his eyes were clear but haunted. His clothes were clean but worn, janitor's work clothes, I realized. He'd lost probably 50 pounds, his face gaunt but somehow more honest than it had ever been. "I come every week," he said quietly, "to tell her I'm sorry. For failing you. For blaming you. For everything." We stood on opposite sides of her grave, neither moving closer. He didn't ask for money, forgiveness, or even acknowledgement. After a few minutes, he placed his carnations next to my roses and turned to leave. "Mason," I called out. He stopped but didn't turn. "Thank you for the letter." He nodded once and walked away. I didn't forgive him. that wasn't mine to give. But standing there, I released the anger I'd been carrying. He was living with his choices, working a humble job, visiting his first wife's grave with grocery store flowers. The man who'd stolen my inheritance was gone, replaced by someone learning what I'd always known: how to survive on almost nothing. That evening, I sat at grandfather's dining table with my own architectural plans spread before me. After 2 years of saving, I'd finally accumulated enough for a down payment on a small house in Oak Park. Nothing grand, a 2-bedroom cottage needing renovation, but with good bones and potential. I could help with the down payment, grandfather offered, though we both knew what I'd say. This needs to be mine. Earned with my own work, bought with my own money. He smiled, understanding. As I sketched renovation plans, I found myself incorporating elements from that stolen Shorewood house. The breakfast nook, the built-in bookshelves, the window seat overlooking the garden. But I was making them better, more functional, truly mine. The breakfast nook would have storage underneath. The bookshelves would frame a workspace. The window seat would open to hold architecture supplies. Harper, Mason, and James had become footnotes in my story. They existed somewhere in Milwaukee, living the life they'd forced on me, while I built something they'd never thought possible. Their blindness to my worth had cost them everything. Their home, their reputation, their family, while giving me the freedom to discover what I was truly capable of. The story could have been about revenge, but it became something else. It became about a girl who built herself from nothing, not to prove others wrong, but to prove herself right. If this story of stolen inheritance and ultimate justice left you speechless, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Mary told Harper to try being more resourceful, while she sobbed on her knees in the parking garage. The exact words Harper had used against Mary for years. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.